It is 6 o'clock, and so I'm going to go ahead and get us started for those of you that are here. So I'm Teresa Wilhelmsen. I'm Utah State Engineer and Director of the Division of Water Rights. And we've got a lineup of folks to bring some information to you. And then we'll also talk about some of the existing policies, water right policies for this area. But essentially what we're looking for at the Division of Water Rights is feedback and comment. And we need comments from the folks that are property owners here, water users here, and what direction should we go forward. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But let me give you just a little bit of a lineup. So first we're going to have the presentation by Janae with the Utah Geological Survey. Is it just you tonight? Okay, just Janae. And then we'll actually turn to Hayden Coombs, who is with the Division of Water Rights. He is our Assistant Regional Engineer in our Richfield office, and he'll talk about the water right policies and some next steps. And then we'll take some comments and questions. And a couple items to be aware of. So there is a card, a sign-up sheet in the back. Make sure that you did sign up. That is how we're going to get a hold of you for any additional public meetings or information that we will send out. There's also a little sheet here that has a QR code on the back. Any of this information, slides, links to the study, public comments, answers to those comments will get posted on the website that this QR code will take you to. So that's what that card is going to do to help you. So they're right on that table right back there where you walked in. We can make sure you get one. Okay, so let's go ahead and have Janae come on up and present on the study.
Is this working? Can you guys hear me okay? I want to adjust it so you can make sure you hear every word I say about this important area. And I can come over there and advance the slides, yeah. Okay, it's good to see everybody tonight. Can you hear me? Okay, because last night Pavat was filled and more people were coming in. I'm like, holy cow. So I'm happy to see a tameable crowd. I'm here with Hugh Hurlow, who's our supervisor of all this, and Trevor Schlossnager, who played a huge role in this as well, so he can also chime in if I start to stumble over things. And Paul Inkenbrandt worked on this and he helped with the budget. And Catherine Leidig right here, this is our team right here working, doing a seepage measurement outside of Tropic Ditch. And they were integral to making this happen. And so this was a big teamwork effort. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. We're going to hone in on where we are. I know a lot of you are super familiar with this area because you grew up here and you know it like the back of your hand, but some of you have only know a little bit about it. So hopefully I'll get the message across that will address all the issues that's a concern for all of us. Oh, use because people are online.
And it doesn't show up on the
okay. All right. Okay, here I can do this. Okay, here we go. Everybody can see this. Okay, so here is the drainage, in the black outline is the drainage basin of the study area. So we're in the East Fork Severe drainage basin, and it's bound on this western margin by the Ponsket Plateau, and on the northwestern by the Severe Plateau, on the eastern margins by the Escalante Mountains, and then finally beautiful Bryce National Park and the Pink Cliffs is the southeastern margin of the basin boundary. We have, it's hard for me to see this here, we have the headwaters of the East Fork. It starts up here in the Ponsket Plateau as a network of seeps and springs, and then it gains momentum as it flows down along this drainage basin here, okay, and it picks up tributaries and then makes it to Tropic Reservoir and hangs out there. And then I don't have my glasses on, you guys. And then it gets diverted at Tropic Ditch, okay, and then this is only from April until October, and then it takes a bend and goes towards the drainage basin over on this path. okay, towards the Colorado River Basin. If the East Fork flows freely, it heads up past Highway 12, okay, and it flows, if it's flowing, northeasterly through Johns Valley, okay, and it picks up water, a little bit of water from Hunt Creek and Cottonwood Creek right here, and from Birch Creek and Horse Creek and Sweetwater Creek. And if any of you are familiar, this is where Sweetwater Ranch is up here. Okay, so it picks up water there and then flows out towards Black Canyon and onwards towards Antimony. So that's our setup. Okay, we have been working here since 2018, and our initial study was this open file report, and it was a two-year study. And what we did in that was set the geologic framework and to determine if there was a surface groundwater connection. And so that's online, and you can get this from here, and we can give you that information. We've also since done a groundwater quality classification map and groundwater petition through the Utah Division of Water Quality Board, and an augmented septic tank density map. We've also published 2 survey notes articles. The Utah Geological Survey puts out a quarterly publication for the layman, for the audience, and it's a 2-page article that gives just a brief synopsis of our study in May in 2021 and then January of 2024. And then finally, what we are all here for tonight, I think, is the culmination of everything in this special study. And so we've incorporated the information that we had in that open file report, the groundwater quality classification map, the septic tank density map, and then we've expanded the area to do a water budget. So we have water coming in, water going out. These are just little snapshots of some of the field areas where we work. That's in the park. This is up on one of the alluvial fans in Emery Valley. This is Trevor loving his job, taking a sample of one of those stock water wells, and Trevor taking a seepage measurement by Tom Best Spring. This is a really cool spring in northern Johns Valley that I'm going to get into a little bit later on the talk. Okay, so a little bit of background context. We know Bryce is a popular area, so it's instead of irrigation driven, because we're not pumping a lot of water here, right? It's driven by tourism. And it was almost 3 million visitors in 2018, and it's probably growing since then. So with this development, there's an increased demand on the water resources naturally, and especially in Emery Valley along that Highway 12 corridor where most of the development exists. This is the tropic diversion. Is my arrow pointing there? Okay, there it is. Okay, so this is the tropic diversion. So East Fork enters here, and that it either flows when it's not diverted, or it gets diverted and goes in the subsurface and it's at the light of day at Water Canyon as it goes outside the park. So the East Fork is part of the East Fork Sevier is part of the larger Sevier drainage basin, but it's unique in the other areas of the state in that it also has water that flows via tropic ditch that has the oldest water right, or one of the oldest water rights in the valley back in the late 1800s, that takes that water from the East Fork and delivers it to the town of Tropic for irrigation purposes. Okay, it's unique in that the water from East Fork Sevier doesn't get to make its way into the Great Basin sometimes. A little bit of background. Okay, I mentioned we did a geologic framework study, the first part. So we characterized the hydrogeology. We took groundwater level measurements. We took discharge and seepage of seeps and springs. We determined the groundwater surface water connection. The expanded study focused on looking at the valley fill aquifer budget. We also looked at groundwater quality and used isotope data to determine groundwater ages and the sources of the water. So let's just walk through this little schematic block diagram. This is just Emery Valley, okay? And just to set the background stage for kind of what's happening in the subsurface in the geologic system. Oh, sorry about that. This is really sensitive. Okay, so let's just go over the color scheme here. On the orange colors are the Clarion Formation. The bottom green layer here, though, those are the Cretaceous sandstones, undivided. And when we're talking about undivided, because there's 3 different major Cretaceous units, the Wahweap, the Straight Crystal Formation, and the Kaparowitz. Most in the Emery Valley are in the Straight Cliffs Formation, but some of it's unknown. We're not really sure because it's in the subsurface, so we're not entirely certain if a driller just says sandstone, for example. Then we have the yellow color here, so that represents the sediments, so the unconsolidated material, and here it's mostly coarse to medium grain sediment because this was once a river environment, okay? It wasn't a lake that like occupied Salt Lake Valley. It was formed by a river system, an alluvial fan system, so the basin margins are where the coarse sediment comes in from the river systems and deposit there, and so this is comprised of coarse sands and gravels, and then the brown on here corresponds to the finer confining units. And if you notice on this diagram, they're not continuous because they're only reported in a few number of wells. We also show the water table on here in the blue dot based on water level measurements. And of course, here's Tropic Reservoir. We know that East Fork flows to the north, right? And it takes a little bend to the north. This is backwards for me, to the northeast, and it flows into Johns Valley. So this next conceptual model shows that continuation of the East Fork River, right, flowing into out of Emery Valley and into Johns Valley and to the north. And here you have a similar scenario where you've got valley fill sediments, and contrasting to Emery Valley, which has a maximum thickness of about 200 feet in basin fill. Here we have up to 300 feet just in a small spot, and I'll show you a map that shows that in detail. But so we have a little bit more storage in Johns Valley, but not much, and there aren't a lot of wells in Johns Valley, mostly stock wells. Here you've got the Ponskent Fault that runs the length of the eastern margin and it extends into the park itself. Different here is we don't necessarily have the Claron Formation over here in the Sevier Plateau. We've got a bunch of volcanics and volcaniclastics. This is a basin fill cross section. This is a plan map. Okay, so we're looking down at the valley fill. Here you've got Highway 12 shown in gray, okay, and then the road that goes down to Ruby's Inn in the city, Bryce Canyon City. We've got the red lines that represent the cross section, and the greens represent the wells that exist in the area. So when we develop a cross section, we're essentially just taking a slice of the earth so we can try to interpret what's going on in the subsurface, and we do this based on what we get from driller's log information. So I'm just going to show you guys A prime, okay, the subsurface, and then perpendicular to that from north to south, C prime. Okay, so the color code scheme is essentially the same. We've got west northwest to east southeast, okay, and going across we've got the Claron Formation, the undifferentiated Cretaceous sandstones here, and then the valley fill material. These vertical lines are the wells with the data that we collected to make this graph. The yellow colors correspond to those medium coarse grain deposits. These dark brown colors correspond to the thicker, siltier confining layers. Okay, and then the lighter brown color is mixed sediment, coarse and fine material. You can see some of these wells, well, maybe it's hard to see, but some of these wells are completed in the Claron. Some wells are completed in both valley fill and bedrock, and some are just completed in the valley fill material, which makes the picture a little complicated. Okay, and so here's the same scenario here where we're taking that perpendicular cross section to that, and here you have the Cretaceous sandstone. Here, the paucity of wells, the scarcity of wells limits us with the data, so we're not entirely sure where the water table is, but we project it up to the water level measurement taken in this well. And it's the same kind of scenario where you have wells completed in valley fill, bedrock, and then some of them completed in both. And then the lack of continuous confining layer is kind of important in terms of protecting your aquifer in water quality terms. and also aquifer properties. Okay, this represents the valley fill thickness. It's an isopac map right here shown on this side. All right, I know it's kind of hard to see the entire thing, so I'm going to blow up this over here. This is Emery Valley, where most of the data exists, where most of the wells exist. And it shows us the depth to bedrock. And so the valley fill in this area, based on these contour lines, shows that right here in the center, this is where we have our thickest valley fill deposits. But as you go towards the valley margins, it's thinner and thinner. So this is 60 feet represents it's 60 feet to bedrock in that particular location. So thickest deposits right here. So it's south of Highway 12, and then they thin towards the basin margin. And then if we take, oops, I'm sorry, I meant to bring up here. So in Johns Valley, obviously less data because there's less wells, but here's our bullseye where we do have 3 wells to define the depth to the bedrock and the valley fill thickness. And in this particular area here, it's up to 300 feet thick. The rest is very similar to the rest of Emery Valley. Thinner at the margins, deeper in the center. Compare this to Great Salt Lake. I know that I'm comparing to that, but the valley fill sediments in Salt Lake are thousands of feet, and we're talking about 100 feet. So there's quite a difference in the amount of water that can be stored in these basins. This is the aquifer transmissivity data. That's transmissivity is how water flows through, how much flows through. So it's measured in square feet per day. This map here on the left shows the values that we obtain from either public supply wells shown in these crosshatch symbols and so that they provided data. They actually did an aquifer test to come up with a number to provide transmissivity, so flow in feet squared per day from a particular well. And then we calculated from driller's logs for the valley fill, there's my arrow, for the yellows, these are the valley fill aquifer, the reds are the bedrock aquifers. The different sizes correspond to flow. So the bigger the bubble, the bigger the flow. So if you look at this map down here, you can see the bigger bubbles are in Emery Valley. So more flow probably is going through there compared to these stock water wells up here in the central part of Johns Valley. You got big flow over here south of Woodstone, relatively speaking, I should say. The plot over here on the right is the transmissivity, the feet squared per day in those water wells. And then here you have valley fill aquifer data and bedrock aquifer data. These are only completed in valley fill aquifer. These are only completed in bedrock aquifer. Okay, so you can see they both have a big range of values, but the key thing to point out here is the median value. Okay, so for the valley fill aquifer, you know, it's over or near 500 square feet per day compared to the bedrock aquifers, which move a little bit more slowly and lessen out. Okay, so it's almost a magnitude higher for the valley fill aquifer. Now we'll switch to groundwater levels. This is a potentiometric surface map. We did groundwater level campaigns from 2018 to 2022. We did it during both the spring and the autumn time. We did it in the springtime to record runoff, right, from snowmelt. And then in the autumn time, we do that for base flow to get the base flow measurements of how it normally flowed if there wasn't any snow available, for example. The blue on here corresponds to the valley fill material. The red dots on here correspond to the wells where we took the water level measurements. Okay, the contours shown here in these black dotted lines correspond to the depth of water at that particular location. And so what the potentiometric surface or the water level map can tell us is groundwater flow direction. Groundwater flows perpendicular to these contours, and naturally it flows, here's the East Fork of the Sevier, not surprisingly, it flows in the same direction as the East Fork River. And so groundwater flows in the same direction as the East Fork. And we did that for every season and every year that we did the study. We made those maps, so that was just one example of one of those maps. Okay, this is data from the USGS, and they have, excuse me, monitoring data on their websites as well, and we use this to augment our study. On this, I keep losing my arrow. On this axis, you have depth to groundwater, below ground surface, and on this you have the year. starting back in 1946, they have data going back to 1946, at least for this upper well, right? And over here on this axis, it's up to 2019. This upper region is for the Emery, Valley, and it's the airport well. The lighter colored green on here correspond to when the well was being pumped. So naturally, when it's being pumped, it's going to show a lot more variation, right? Because it's not going to represent the true water level because it's being pumped. So it's a little bit more sporadic here. Excuse me. Here's when it's not pumped, and it shows a little bit more steady, not so up and downy. But the hydrograph shows what the water level was, and I guess the bottom line on this is to show that sure, there's variations in season and time. Okay, same with this bottom one, which is in Johns Valley. It goes back from the 60s to 2019. This is not pumped. Okay, so it shows variation in season and time, and we know that hiccup in the 80s when we had a big groundwater year, right, and a big water year in general, and that shows here. But then it steadily declines and then just kind of goes back and forth. Bottom line on this graph is you see these two linear, okay, extrapolations, and in the long term, what we see is a slight increase in the water level over 30 years, and long-term change is negligible. So bottom line is long-term change is negligible. Oh yeah, sure. Sorry if that's distracting.
No worries.
So I brought. Okay, excuse me. Some of these two graphs are from our older report, but this is to demonstrate the difference between the bedrock water levels and the alluvial water levels. And remember that when we did the study, it was just a snapshot in time. Okay, it's not a long-term, right? And we did it during drought conditions for the most part. And so I'm just going to emphasize this one right here. This is a bedrock well down in Emery's Valley up on the alluvial fan. If any of you know Kevin Poe, this is his well. Anyway, it shows that, and this is an exaggerated graph here because this is it looks like it's a big jump, but the most it's changed is 1 foot. Okay, and the lowest ever recording in Kevin Poe's well was 186.8 feet. His highest level was 187.8. Okay, so that's not a big fluctuation in that 4-year period, and these don't correspond to any change in precipitation event or anything. So we've got this. There were 2 BLM wells off of south of Highway 12 that had never been used during the whole study. One of them was defunct, and we went by there today, and now they have solar panels up there, and I guess they've revamped it. But that's this one here, and it does show during our sampling, our water level measurement campaign, that there were fluctuations, and there was a 4-foot fluctuation, and there was a big jump based on the 2019 precipitation event. Now, this one over here is the coolest of all. This is the BLM well that we have measurements for, also showing that 2019 spike, and then it drops down. We put a transducer in there to record water levels continuously. And since this study has been done, I've gone back and downloaded the data, and I was very interested in finding out whether 2023 had an impact, and it's jumped up 17 feet. The point is that the alluvial fill aquifers respond a lot more readily to precipitation than the other wells, than the bedrock wells. And we hope to continue to keep this transducer in here to keep monitoring. Okay, so short-term groundwater level change. We did this type of map for all of the years. This is just for autumn 21 to spring 2022. And here are the types of wells. The public supply wells are in diamonds, domestic wells in circles, monitoring wells are upside down triangles, and the stock wells are shown in squares. The different color codes here correspond to water level changes, with the hotter colors corresponding to either nothing changes or a negative change, and the greens corresponding to a water level increase. Take home from this is that most of the wells that we sampled in the region had either had no change or dropped in water levels. And there are 2 or 3 on here that showed an increase. This one right here, I believe, is completed in both bedrock and alluvial fill. Okay, switching gears to the East Fork seepage runs, when we all went out and we took teams of 3 of us to go out and measure the discharge, the flow on East Fork and the tributaries coming into the system. So this is another one of those snapshots in time where one group took measurements on this leg, this reach of the river and tributaries. Another group took measurements on this part of the valley up to Tom Best Road, and then another group took measurements in the northern part of the valley. These red numbers here correspond to where the river is losing, okay, losing to groundwater. This, of course, during the time of measurement, yellow is dry, so there were no measurements because there was no flow. And then the green is because the East Fork is gaining water, and it's gaining water from groundwater. So as this slide says, it loses through Emery Valley and Southern Johns Valley if it's flowing. There have been times where this has flowed, but it's been pretty rare. I think Trevor can speak to this. It flowed, I think, after 2019, maybe up into this area, just shortly for a little while. The next slide I show will be from that spring that I showed you earlier in the talk, and it's located, oh, my glasses on, about right here. No, it's on this side of the East Fork, so it's about right here. Okay, this spring right here, it averages about 2 CFS. I think we've measured it 4 or 5 times, and it's located. So this is a view of Northern Johns Valley. Here, the spring issues out from alluvium. It's not at the base of a hill, so it's about 20 feet away from the base of this hill. And it flows through culverts into this ditch. So it's managed. Cottonwood Creek flows over here to the right of the screen and then joins here. And this flows to the north, and then it kind of peters out. Over on this area, it's every time we've always been there, it's perpetually wet. So it's this wetland that's about 1,000 acres in size. Over here is the East Fork of the Sevier. So from the East Fork of the Sevier to this spring and this canal, there's this big wetland that's always wet. And so the water table is intersecting the ground surface at this area. So this is our drive home of this is our surface groundwater connection. Okay, now totally switching to the Valley Fill Aquifer Water Budget. Now we use the SWB, that's the soil water balance from the U.S. Geological Survey. We use their model to calculate input and output, water coming in, water going out. And on the left, we show the recharge, and on the right, we show the discharge. And what the model shows us is that the adjacent mountain block, by far, puts out the most acre per feet into the Valley Fill Aquifer. And by the adjacent mountain block, I mean the Ponsicket Plateau, the Escalante Mountains, things like that. By runoff infiltration, those are areas like on the alluvial fans where you have Birch Creek, Horse Creek, Huntington Creek, Cottonwood Creek flowing into the system. So those alluvial fans, the drainage there is inputting water into the system. Much lower on the rung is direct precipitation onto the valley fill from direct infiltration. And even lower still is East Fork seepage. And then finally, septic tanks. You can calculate the amount of flow coming from the septic tank systems, which is just a blip, right, in the relative recharge, and then basin interflow. Total recharge is a little over 9,000 acre feet. The discharge from the model is East Fork gain of about 5578 acre feet. Phreatophytes or vegetation, the ET, the evapotranspiration coming from those, is estimated second largest at just over 5,000 acre feet. Pumping, if you compare this to the rest, it's just a blip, right? It's just 358, so it's very minor in terms of discharge. So a total discharge of just under 11,000 acre feet. If we jump to this graph down here, we've got the different years that we simulated the study in the model. So 2017 through 2021, we've got our total recharge here, our total discharge here, reported for each of those years. And then net groundwater change down here on, oh goodness, on the bottom. Let's just take 2019, for example. You see we have a surplus. It's like a budget you have at home. Money coming in, money coming out. Whoa, look at all this. We got all this money coming in, right? And not much money coming out because we think that we're really rich and we have a residue. So we have a residual in the budget, 4,500. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, still in this snapshot of time, we've got a slight deficit in our budget. Normally it balances, water in, water out, recharge, equal discharge. But here, over the years of the study, we have a slight deficit, and the average is minus 1,800. Jumping directions again into water quality. Okay, we took about 40 samples from wells, springs, and the streams to characterize the groundwater. And the total dissolved solids concentrations, total dissolved solids is how we characterize the water. It's how the Utah Water Quality Board deems water to be pristine or drinking water quality and such, and found that here we have a range from 192 to 716 milligrams per liter with an average of 303. That's one of the lowest in the state, you guys. It's just amazing. Maybe even beats out Beaver, I don't know. So the quality is excellent. The major ion composition, the characteristic of the water is calcium magnesium bicarbonate. From the isotopes, we determined that it's mostly young water, so it's pretty recent, but there is some old water. The Claron Formation mostly has modern water that was recharged after 1950. The sandstones, however, have mixed and older signatures, and the carbon-14 showed us that we had ages up to 5,000 and one well up to 18,000 years in age. 8,000 years in age. 18,000. And this diagram here represents how we plot this information up. They're called Piper plots, and here you have magnesium, calcium, and you can see most of the data plot in the magnesium calcium with a few outliers. This one is probably up by the Severe Plateau where there's a volcanic influence, but all the rest of the anionic composition is bicarbonate. So calcium, magnesium, bicarbonate. Over here on the right is the total dissolved solids concentration map, broken out by whether it's a well, spring, or stream. The cooler colors are the better water, if you can have better water, right? And then the reds are the ones that are above 500 milligrams per liter. And you can notice that, again, there's only 2 of those in the valley that exceed 500 milligrams per liter. So overall, the water quality is just fantastic, which is why we generated this groundwater quality classification map that was approved by the Groundwater Quality Board as pristine 1A. This green in here, you don't classify a well, you classify an entire aquifer. So it's deemed formally as pristine class 1A water, which is a good management tool to have in your pocket. And then finally, the takeaways from this, I hope, is that most of the water that you guys are using is young. It's modern. It's relatively recently recharged, and that the valley fill aquifer responds pretty rapidly, geologically speaking, to precipitation events, whereas this Cretaceous bedrock aquifer doesn't show much response, if any. Both aquifers, Emery and Johns Valley, have low storativity because they're not real big, but relatively high transmissivity, so water is moving through there. There is a close connection between the valley fill aquifer and surface water. It's fabulous water quality. It's worth preserving. And in our study, we recommended that there's installation of a monitoring well that's nested in both the valley fill aquifer and the bedrock aquifer, so we can get an idea of what's happening between the connection between the two. And then the measurement of the trophic ditch diversion is important in this area because the water that goes to the Colorado River Basin drainage instead of into the East Fork of the Sevier. And then finally, Catherine took that way. This is the dry East Fork near Highway 12, almost always like this. This is eastern, the East Fork in Johns Valley, Northern Valley, almost always looks like this. And then in 2023, when I came up and I took that, oh, it's not showing up. Oh, it's a video.
Really?
Yeah, oh, there it is.
There it is.
There it is. This is where I was standing right off, like I'm standing right here and off the screen it was a video shot, but this is the water flowing. Here's the bike path. I don't know if you can see the bike path right here. And for those of you who live there, you know this was happening. It was crazy. Yeah, so just off the screen or where that stick picture was. It was pretty cool. And that's what I got.
Do you want to take questions now?
Sure. I have the easy job, Teresa.
When we're showing discharge working, how did you measure evapotranspiration?
Oh, good question. We measured it using the soil water balance model. There are daily averages taken from rasters. So we had DayMet, climatic data. Paul, help me out here. We had climate data that had precipitation and it had ET. It had the DEM, digital elevation model. It had soil properties and vegetation properties.
Yeah, you put in.
These are rasters
that. Soil water balance model, basic bucket model. We looked at OpenET. We looked at OpenET, which is a Landsat-based estimate, but it's mainly best suited for flat agricultural areas. So for the mountains, we looked at the soil water balance, and that's what we used to get at ET based on the amount of measured precip and how the soil properties and land use. Mm-hmm.
Eddie Covariance Station.
One question. Okay, one question I have is, if your study over the 5-year period shows a negative balance of around 1,800, almost 2,000 acre feet. So there's 2,000 acre feet leaving the aquifer more than is coming in. Why don't you see that reflected in groundwater levels? And I'm thinking in particular the Ruby's End wells, which account for, I think, about 2/3 of that, almost 2/3 of the 350 acre feet per year that come from wells. The water levels in those wells are, at the same or higher than what they were when they were drilled in the 70s. So if we're losing all this water out of the aquifer, why don't we see water levels decline?
We do see water levels decline. We do see the water levels decline. The Ruby.
Well, in those Ruby's End wells, the water levels they're the same or higher than what they were when they were drilled in 78.
We had trouble taking some of the Ruby water levels because a lot of times they were pumping, and we'd take those measurements even when they were pumping. And so I don't know if that skewed our data. That's something to consider. We also did it with the Pines well because it was always pumping. And so and we put that as a caveat in our report. If you're taking water level measurements when it could be sporadic, so it doesn't represent exactly what's going on. So I don't have an answer for you, Bill.
I noticed that too. Could it be that the water budget was calculated during that kind of I noticed that too. Could it be that the water budget was calculated during a relatively anomalously dry time, and so there were declines during that time period in contrast to the long-term water levels that do not show that? So maybe those have recovered. If you're talking about now, they certainly have just recovered since last year. I'm not sure though. I'm not sure if that's the answer.
I have a somewhat related question on the water budget numbers, like you showed for the last few years, an average of 1,200 acre feet lost. What kind of uncertainty might there be in some of those? I'm sure there's a little bit of, or is it minus 1,800? There a little bit of uncertainty in say anything about that.
Right, Paul?
For this particular study, Catherine didn't calculate uncertainty across the model, but you're probably, because of the way we had to calculate this budget, you're probably close to the uncertainty value at about 2,000 acre feet. So that could be within error. The fact that we're not seeing significant storage changes in the available monitoring wells could speak to a close to balanced budget on the long term.
Yeah, and if we ran this out to 2023, then we'd have.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just getting into this. If we ran this through 2023.
It would probably bump it up.
It would. I'll bet it would be close to balanced.
Zero. Yeah.
Because we'd have 3 dry and 4 dry and 2 very wet. So, yeah,
So the point is that when you get lots of water, you're gonna, everything's
yeah,
gonna be,
especially in this aquifer, which
Yes.
responds really quick.
You'll have to forgive me if I ask stupid questions, but I'm not a hydrologist or a geologist, just curious. From what I've been hearing in response to these past questions, it sounds like what we could possibly be seeing is an aquifer, and we're just looking at valley fill. We're not looking at what's below it. An aquifer that's in equilibrium. It's some years it's up, some years it's down. Long term, there's no sign that it's being overdrafted or mined.
no sign of being overdrafted or mined, but
Okay,
it also depends on the future.
well, doesn't everything?
Yeah.
We just had an election and we're all wondering now. As I recall from looking through the study, it talked about very briefly about the relation between the underlying, what are called in there, the bedrock or Cretaceous aquifers and the valley fill aquifer. And the summary statement was essentially there doesn't seem to be much mixing between them, and your age data that you showed indicates that. You'd think, unless there's a really tight aquiclude or aquitard separating them, you'd see, at least in the margins, you'd see some mixture. You're apparently not seeing that. And I'm wondering how do we explain that? Is it hydrologic in that the water that's actually moving through the system pretty much exclusively is the upper valley fill aquifer water? The rest of the water is essentially, it's just there and it's hardly moving. I'm sure it is some, but it's not like a flowing river down there or anything. So is it a hydrologic condition, or is it the geologic condition where there's some kind of a formation that just really separates them? What do you think it is?
I'm not sure. I could just say that the sandstone aquifer likely receives its recharge from upward, it's exposed in the higher terrain. Okay, so where it's exposed, and then it flows down that. But it's highly compartmentalized with all the faults in this valley. And so there's no continuity, but regionally, there's probably a regional, very slow groundwater flow for the Cretaceous sandstone aquifer. Again, they're not continuous. There were insufficient wells to determine whether there was a bedrock alluvial connection, and that's why we're recommending that there be nested wells in
Okay.
place so that we can monitor that to see if there is any impact on the Cretaceous aquifer from the behavior of the alluvial aquifer. But I don't know if I've answered that. I know that the isotopic signature in the Cretaceous is suggestive of a non-evaporative component, which is indicative of it not receiving surface water to replenish it. It may be receiving recharge from the valley fill aquifer, but we don't have anything conclusive to suggest that.
But if the bedrock aquifer is basically full, any water that, I do know enough to know that water flows downhill usually. So any new water that's coming in, if it encountered, as it moves through the VFA, if it encounters those lower aquifers, it would tend not to go into them, but go over the top.
Ooh, that's $1 million question. I wish I knew the answer. Yeah. What happens when the water reaches that bedrock? The bedrock aquifer is not going to be as pretty as we show it here, right? It's not going to be this straight, flat structure. It's going to be all, right? It's going to be corrugated. It's probably going to have a topographic surface. I'm not sure what this looks like. And how we have this depicted here is, all conjecture based on our well logs, based on the data from the well logs. And so the nature of that boundary is right now I don't know if it will ever be known unless we do seismicity or something. If we knew that, we'd all be rich.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So in all your studies that you've done and all the talk, there's always the airport well. There's
Mhm.
always, it seems like it's a hinge point right there, that airport well. Is that, when that was fluctuating up and down, how many gallons per minute was being used? How much was that well being used during that time?
Yeah.
I can tell you
Yeah.
very little. That
Yeah.
well, the reason it's flat is they had to drill a new well because that one is not a good well.
Yeah.
There's so many, this studies refers to the airport well all the time, and I don't think that's an accurate area to be able to monitor what goes on in the Emery Valley, because that's a poor well.
Mm.
And again, they had to re-drill, that's why it's flat. In the 80s, I started being around the airport a lot, and there wasn't much there. And, there's not much water, there's a
Right.
couple of restrooms, and there wasn't even a house at that time. And when they put the house in and expanded the airport, that well couldn't keep up. So they drilled another well. That's why it's flat, because it's not being used. And I went and looked at the cap on it, and it's capped in the bottom of the pump house. It's capped on the floor. The bolts are rusted. I don't know if you could even get those off and access that well anyway.
Mhm.
So it's used all the time, and it's a poor, to me, it's a poor anchor point to be able to monitor what goes on in the Emery Valley by that well. It's poor. I'm not a driller. I'm not even a water specialist or specialist. I just know about that well a little bit, speaking with people that's been working there for many years and being there myself in the 80s and through, when it was an active airport, there was somebody there every day, calling in airplanes, and so I just don't think it's a very good resource.
Good to know.
Could a well like he's describing, even if it's not a very productive well, if the perforations are still open, could it still be a viable indicator of static groundwater levels?
I think, yeah, well, that's the BLM well that we're using because it hasn't been pumped in, I don't know how many years. It's defunct. It doesn't even have a cap, so to speak, on it. This one right here, right? The wells that aren't used, that aren't pumped, is a good way to monitor because it gives you an idea of they're not being impacted. Well, they could be impacted by the surrounding wells, but this one doesn't seem to show that.
As long as they're still open in the bottom to where they are subject to the influence of groundwater changes. I mean, if they're just plugged up down there, then they're probably not reliable, but if the perforations in the casing are still open,
Allowing water in and
allowing water to flow in and out as the levels change, then you could still rely on them. Is that?
I think fairly so, yeah. And in fact, Ruby's they have a whole field of like four wells out in this area. Some of them don't have a cap on them. They're these PVC pipes that go down pretty far, and we've taken samples of those and water levels from those, and they don't get pumped. No one even knows they're there except for the cows. And we trusted their water level measurements to do this study. We dealt with the data we had.
With respect to the airport well, the USGS still monitors and even up through March of this year. I do have a question. Your sample, the water sample from the airport well, was that from the original well?
It wasn't from the USGS well, it
It
was
was
from,
from the new well?
yep, me talking to Ty saying, hey, can I sample your water? And he's like, yeah, come on over.
And that was actually completed in the alluvium.
Yep.
Yeah, versus the,
Yep, that's a different airport well. It's a little
right, it's to the
confusing.
north.
Yeah, I should say Ty's well.
Just clarification though, to make sure, the old airport well, we're not sure whether it's completely diluvian or the airport.
I'm not sure.
The
Yeah.
USGS says it's in the pirates, it says it's in the bedrock, but I've never been able to find a log for it.
Yeah, a log or the well, I haven't been able to find the other Northern Johns well, and I've looked all over for it.
But it does respond similar to the wells that we're monitoring, which are in the bedrock. Very small changes year to year.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a clarification. So you're saying bedrock, and you're often clumping the Claron and the Cretaceous together?
No, I mean, I am generally saying bedrock, but no, the Cretaceous has a definite signature that's modern water compared to, and it's, yeah, Claron compared to the Cretaceous. And Claron crops out at the surface, and there are wells that are, you can clearly see that they're, you know, they penetrate them. But the sandstone aquifers are found at depth.
So your transmissivity values, are they for the Cretaceous versus alluvium? Or is the Claron in there?
Good point.
That is.
Were you able to see any differences? I'm assuming the Cretaceous is much more hosted than the Claron.
I'm not sure that we differentiated.
For the transmissivity estimates,
Oh, whoops.
Claron and Cretaceous.
I'm not trying to segue, I promise. I'm just like,
They're lumped
I
together
hit
because there just
escape
weren't
instead.
enough data to split them.
You guys can hear me okay? Okay. Okay, good. Hello, everyone. I'm Hayden Coombs. I'm in the Richfield office. I recognize some of the faces out here. However, I haven't met everyone. Do you want me to switch to? Okay. Okay. So I haven't met all of you though. And I look forward to, I love having water users come up to our Richfield office, get to know you guys. It's one of my favorite parts of the job. Like to help you guys out with your water right questions. So if you ever have questions, please come to our office. We're happy to help you. Hopefully you leave our office feeling better about the water right answers we can give you and help you out with it. That's our goal. We want to help the public and help you guys with it. So anyway, look forward to get to know you all more. And then also just a quick shout out to UGS. We really appreciate them and your guys' studies. It's really helpful to us as a regional office. It's the data and information they provide really helps us make better decisions. With the better science, the better technology that we have, the best data we can get helps us make the best decisions. So we're really appreciative of them and what you guys provide to us. I'm kind of getting feedback. Are you guys okay? There's no, all right, okay. A little sensitive.
But it's okay.
All right, okay. As long as it's bearable, I'll just keep going. But so my job tonight is hopefully, as the Division of Water Rights, what we do with these studies, we take the information from them and to help us make the best decisions we can regionally for this water resource. As the Division of Water Rights, we are a regulatory agency, so we do our best to see if there's any changes that we need to make and make any tweaks or adjustments. Tonight, what I hope to do is to give you guys a summary of what we've taken from this study, what's helped us, what's been enlightening to us. Talk about potential concerns. We don't know if they're valid concerns yet. We're still looking into this and formalizing ideas and how to proceed forward. And that's why we're here too. We want to get your guys' input. We want to get your questions, your comments. That was a great comment about the airport well. Items like that. That's what we're hoping to get is feedback from you as we go forward and potentially see if we need to make any tweaks or adjustments. But as of tonight, we don't have a plan to propose to you. There's no changes that we're going to propose here tonight. We're still in the development area of this. And then also, similar to Janae, we'll have a question and comments towards the end, but if you have a quick question, I'm happy to answer those as we go through, but we will have some time at the end to go through that. So to begin off, just want to talk about a couple key findings, things that we've learned from this, from the study and potential concerns that we have. So what you see here, there's a lot of information on this slide that you see here. This is table 6 taken from the UGS study. I loved your slide. I kind of want to copy and paste and put it in here because it's very much more summarized and condensed and a great visual. But what we do like from this table, it's a great summary of the water budget. Like Janae explained, water budget is basically water coming in, water going out. One item that we do see and take notice in is this value, this average value that is leaving the northern end of the boundary in the Johns Valley area. That is a discharge. That is, if you take an account of water, that would be a negative value. It's also an indication that there's water present in the aquifer that's still entering the system. It's exiting this boundary of the study area, but is water present. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the Johns Valley. Another thing I want to point out, which Janae touched on as well. So this is figure 12. But really, the study area and the water budget that's been presented to us, it does include both valleys together, hand in hand, Johns Valley, Emery's Valley. We also would just like to recognize that they are two different valleys as well. The budget is inclusive of both of them together, but they are, of course, two different valleys. You have different recharge sections in the Johns Valley that you see up here, Pine Lake area, and then over on the west side as well. And then the Emery's Valley, you have recharge areas that aren't necessarily specific to Johns Valley. Eventually it goes into Johns Valley, but more primarily unique to Emery's Valley immediately. And then lastly, we've looked at this figure. I'm glad this was part of yours. And we've talked about the airport well a little bit already. But one good indication of these two long-term monitoring wells that we have. One used to be a pumping well. Well, two of them are pumping wells, apologize, and then one's a monitoring well now. But you can look at this long-term data, the best long-term data we have available in this area. And generally speaking, this trend of water levels tends to be relatively stable. We don't see a significant continuous decline in the water levels of the aquifer. Generally speaking, they tend to be stable. So that's a good indication for us. So let's talk about key findings and potential concerns. Again, these are potential concerns. Those are just ideas that we're looking at, wondering if we need to be worried about these types of ideas, okay? So Johns Valley, again, I touched on this. There's that value of over 5,000 acre feet leaving the system. Again, as a water rights perspective, that's water in the aquifer. That's water in the aquifer that's entering and then becomes part of surface rights downstream from there. But that's water present in the Johns Valley aquifer and the Valley Fill aquifer there. One question that we have is how much of this over 5,000 acre feet, how much of that excess water entering the East Fork River, how much is that actually coming from Emery Valley versus how much is coming from just this portion of the watershed of Johns Valley alone? that's a great question. That's something that we hope to dig into further, see if that's something that we need to better understand or be of any concern there. So, and then moving on to Emery Valley. So key findings and concerns, we've touched on this a lot, is that it's relatively a very shallow valley fill aquifer. The 300-foot value there, I would say, is generous, just, you know, based off of the data that we had. I think the deepest well we had on your figure was 210 feet. So I think the 300 there is a little bit generous. It's probably closer to that 200, 250 range is probably the deepest part of the aquifer, based on what we know with the data that we have, right? But generally speaking, that is a relatively pretty shallow valley fill aquifer. So what does that mean? Why is that a potential concern? One, the UDS study, and they touched on this in their report, but it's relatively, it can be sensitive to the water levels in the winter time, precipitation. It's relatively sensitive. We see those fluctuations relatively quickly. And then also, just conceptually speaking, right? If I was to take a glass of water, put a straw in it, and take a drink out of it, you'd see that water level drop, versus if I put that straw in a water trough that cattle drink out of and I take a drink out of that straw, not a big difference, right? There's two different concepts in that. And that's what we would call aquifer storage. So with a shallow aquifer, that could be closer to the glass of water type of scenario. With a very, very deep and broad and heavy aquifer type of situation, that could be a watering trough. So again, just conceptually speaking. And then another thing that we'd like to better understand is the safe yield of the Emery Valley aquifer. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. So I'm going to kind of go speak on that in the next slide. And then with Emery Valley, because it's shallow, it's a shallow valley fill aquifer, and there's a lot of interest in this area, more wells in this area. Is there potential for well-to-well interference? Is that something we should be concerned about? Again, a question, relatively speaking, a potential concern.
Can I clarify the basin fill thickness?
Yes, please. Yeah,
Sorry about that. So there are 350 plus foot wells up in Johns Valley.
correct. Yes,
Okay, so this slide, the highest contour value in Emery Valley is 200.
correct. Yes.
So you've got 300 up there.
He mentioned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
No.
one 200-foot well, I mean, it's right next to another one. It's cuttings from an oil well. And
Yeah.
I logged it. I did the best I could. That's what it showed us. So that part, that little 200-foot part may be there where it's generous. Otherwise,
Right. Yeah.
I think it's pretty well constrained.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. It's a great point. Yeah, just to clarify this more, like I said, this slide is about Emery Valley. So we're talking here. I think that 300-foot value on there is probably too generous, just based off of the information that we have. But you're right. There is a section in Johns Valley where there's a deeper well. But yes, I'm specifically talking about Emery's Valley. It's probably shallower than that 300-foot. Is that?
Sorry.
300 is up to John.
Emery's up.
Yes. Okay. All right. So let's talk about safe yield. What is safe yield? Generally speaking, safe yield, we want to understand the long-term recharge coming into an aquifer and how much can we discharge or withdraw from that aquifer and not cause any harmful impacts to the aquifer, generally speaking. So how much is coming in? We don't want to exceed the water going out of that aquifer in a long-term period. That would be the safe yield to kind of balance that out. So my dad he was a diesel mechanic, and he always preached this to us. If you take care of your equipment and maintain your equipment, they'll take care of you. And that's how I like to think of safe yield of an aquifer. If you take care and understand what your aquifer needs and what it needs to remain a healthy aquifer, it will take care of you with the discharge that you'll withdraw from it. So again, what we'd like to get and better understand, what is that long-term recharge of Emery Valley specifically? We have a really awesome data that we got from UTS that's really just increased our understanding of this area. What's that long-term specifically to Emery Valley? What's that recharge value? And then likely, or similarly, what's the discharge that we're currently pumping out of the Emery Valley area, and how much more is there to come before we can potentially cause a concern for this safe yield? So just to put some numbers in perspective of what we currently have, and we're still looking at this. We'll tweak and refine these numbers as we continue to investigate this further. But so existing water rights that we have in Emery Valley, I went through and tabulated everything. This is paper water. So there's paper water and wet water. How much water is actually being withdrawn? Maybe less than this. But as far as paper water, existing water rights in Emery Valley, I tabulated about 550 acre feet of water between everything. And this is well water rights, I should say. How much water has been approved but is still undeveloped that's been brought into Emery Valley? So this has been done via change applications. Someone has found a valid water right. They've went through the process through the state engineer's office to file a change application and transferred into Emery Valley. It's approved. It hasn't been proved up on. It hasn't been certificated yet, so considered it as undeveloped still. That's about 330 acre feet. So we're adding about 60% more water into the Emery Valley aquifer right now, and totaling about 880. So where are we? Are we at a healthy location? Can we do more? Those are questions that we'd like to answer and figure out and get a better understanding on. Carrie.
So there is the 550 acre feet, those are perfected water rights.
Those are existing valid water rights, yes.
Well, approved change application is valid water right.
Yes,
550, those are perfected water rights in the Emery Valley.
yes, they are existing approved perfected water rights, not currently in just an approved status via change application.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to segue, and I'm just going to explain what the current water rights policy is in the Severe River Basin, and then just potentially our next steps. What do we do from here? So our current Severe River Basin water rights policy, this includes Johns and Emery Valley. It was adopted in 1997, and as all of you are probably well aware, this area is close to new appropriations of water. So there's no more appropriations. Basically, this area is, new water development is subject to change applications. What is going through the right procedure through Title 73, Chapter 3, Sections 3 and 8. Going through a temporary fixed time, permanent change application, bringing existing water rights into the valley. That is the current policy of how you can get water into this area. Again, this just touches on a couple other very specific policies. We'll go through this. Sorry, I'm still getting feedback. Please let me know if anyone's ears are getting really sensitive. I'm happy to change, but.
If people can hear him okay in the room, we can just turn off the speaker. Should we try that?
Are we okay online too? I can use the mic too if the mic uses the online.
You gotta use the mic. You gotta use the mic.
For me, it's like, I don't have like this. I feel like I'm like on Earth again. Wow, I've like heard this echo all night. Now it's like, how's everyone doing? All right, okay. All right, so these are potential policy updates that could happen if we find that if they're necessary. Again, we're not proposing these right now. These are just potential ideas of what could potentially happen. Again, we're seeking your input. We'd like to hear from you guys and get your input on these specific ideas. If you have other inputs or other comments or questions, we'd love to get those. So number one being, we need to estimate the safe yield of the Emery Valley Aquifer and the Johns Valley Aquifer. I don't want to exclude that. But of course, there's a lot of development interest in the Emery Valley. So we'd like to better understand that. And once we can determine what a safe yield of Emery Valley is, and we understand how much water is currently in Emery Valley and how much has been approved in Emery Valley, how much additional water can be brought into Emery Valley before we start to approach that safe yield ceiling? That's a question that we would love to get answered and get a better understanding of. And then while we're doing that, what is Emery Valley? If we make a policy tweak like that, we need to define what Emery Valley is. So ideas of what that could look like to define the Emery Valley is one being just the boundary of the valley fill aquifer. That's a potential idea. It could be described by PLS descriptions, public land survey descriptions, whether it be townships, ranges, sections, a simplified way to just define this if we need to make a policy tweak, okay? And then we touched on this as well, potential well interference. Do we need to take that into consideration? How would it impact other wells? Is that something we should be concerned about? Again, just questions that we would like to better understand and answer. And then we do just want to point out, if we do find a safe yield, and if we find kind of that ceiling and how close are we to it, of course, water could continue to be transferred out of Emery Valley. That is something that would, of course, would be able to continue via change applications and going through the proper process through the state engineer's office. Next steps. You want me to go through this or? Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is the Division of Water Rights. We're going to continue to look at the UGS study and digest more and more the information that's been provided to us. We're going to make the best decisions we can on scientific data. So we'll continue to look at that. We're going to look at our water rights database, existing water rights in the area, and better understand that. Like I said, those numbers are numbers that I found preliminary. They're going to get adjusted as we continue to look at this, and we'll make adjustments there. So like I've touched on this, no policy is currently being proposed right now. It may be that we need to tweak it a little bit. It may be that we're in a really good, healthy position. We're not sure yet. We're going to continue to look at it, and we'd like to get you guys' comment on that. And that leads to my last point is, which I'm just going to move to this slide as we get to it. But this is how we would like to get comments on this. I don't know if you want to touch on this, Teresa. Okay. All right. So the way that we would like to get input from you, there's several ways that you could communicate with us. One is sending an email or a letter, a written question or comment to us, that could be provided here in this email address, or of course at our mailing address at the Division of Water Rights in Salt Lake City. I believe this QR link, do we have a page for?
It's the meeting page.
Okay, yeah, so this QR link, what it will do, and it's also on the handouts by your sign-up sheet. So again, please take one. It's a very quick way to get access to the website page. But what we have is a website page that will have this meeting on it, the recorded meeting. It will have the UGS study on it, I believe, right? And any other information, question, comments that we'll continue to receive. We're going to continue to update this website. It will kind of be an ongoing live website as we go through this process. So please use this QR code, utilize it. Please email us, write us letters. You're welcome to call us as well. But we do love getting emails and letters as well, just so we can provide those quickly. So with that, I will.
60 days.
60 days. Okay. Yes. Thanks, Teresa. So we would like to get you guys' feedback promptly, right? 60 days. That's the time period that we'd like to get this feedback as much as we can. 60 days is what we're hoping for. So please, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, we'd like to open up for any questions or comments. This is my favorite part because they've just like allowed me to go rogue tonight, but I'm a good ricocheter with questions. So if I can answer it, there's also great people that can for me. So any questions with what I've went over?
Just also add, just real quick. So if we could get This is just going online, right?
Yes, for the people online.
If we could get comments within 60 days, we'll get the responses shortly after that for folks. But really what we're looking for is the feedback, especially for folks here in Emery Valley. Some of the things that you may need help understanding is if there were changes to policy for change application, how does that affect, economically, property owners and other things in this area? And we would just hate to do some sort of policy change that then has a negative impact here in Emery Valley. So we're just looking for that kind of feedback, help us understand that. How we would proceed if we were to make changes to the current policy. Say if we did need to restrict change applications moving water up to here, it would be through a public process. So we'd have another public meeting where we bring a draft of a potential policy for feedback as well. So that's where we need your help. We're not going to do this in a black box. It definitely needs public feedback. So we really are looking for that.
Okay.
Questions
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, thanks. Any questions? We're happy to
If I may.
answer them. Yeah.
I'm just curious, I think we've shown pretty clearly there's a strong connection between groundwater and the flow in the East Fork Severe. Just curious if in the assessing this, is that long, dry, almost perpetually dry stretch of the Severe of concern, and would potential impacts on discharge, surface flow of the Severe come into your evaluation of safe yield and that?
Yeah, great question. So, oh yeah, I don't need to repeat because you got a back microphone. Yeah, great question. So I think we would agree. There's a really strong connection of the surface water and the groundwater. And right now we don't know that answer because I think that's kind of part of the process of determining a safe yield. Better understanding, right? The recharge coming in the aquifer and the discharge leaving the aquifer. So yes, that's something we need to consider. Is it a concern during drought years? Yes, we have, a 5-year sample data of data. But yes, that's something we need to take into consideration. Drought years, plentiful years. What does this mean? What's this long-term safe yield of the aquifer? It's a great question that we hope to get better answers for. Any others? All right, you guys made this really simple for me.
Yeah, well,
All right, okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. Again, we're looking forward to get your guys' questions and comments. We're really relying on that. So looking forward to hear from you. Looking forward to meeting you all in the Richfield office. If you find yourself in our area, come in, meet with us. We're happy to talk with you. So thank you all.
Or even invite Hayden down to come look at the areas if you wanted to see some stuff.
Yes, yeah, I love coming down here as well. So